The chandeliers shimmered as Emily said, "This is the moment we dreamed of." Daniel held her hand tightly, his smile steady, though his jaw flickered with nerves. The crowd watched, hushed, each guest leaning forward as the music swelled. Emily's father, Richard, clasped a champagne flute, his polished smile fixed while his eyes darted between the DJ booth and the dancing pair. The first dance had barely begun when the beat faltered. Emily whispered, "Daniel, did the song just stop?" Daniel forced a laugh, but sweat beaded near his temple. Guests shifted in confusion, whispers rippling like cracks in glass. The DJ Tyler cleared his throat into the microphone, his voice shaking. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, pausing as silence pressed heavy on the ballroom. Emily's mother, Margaret, mouthed words at him, panic stiff in her movements. The pause dragged until Tyler's words cut through. "There is something that needs to be said before this goes any further." Emily's heart pounded as Daniel's grip turned rigid. Then Tyler's voice sharpened. "The person funding this wedding demands to speak before vows continue." Gasps echoed, glasses clinked, and Richard's hand froze mid-toast. Emily forced herself to keep smiling as whispers grew louder. Daniel muttered, "This isn't part of the plan." Richard's face remained carved in control, but his fingers flexed on the stem of the glass. Margaret whispered to a nearby guest, her eyes darting toward Emily. Tyler stayed frozen behind the booth, microphone still in hand. The crowd shifted like a single restless body. Emily's heart raced as she asked, "Why is this happening now?" Daniel's jaw locked, his silence louder than words. Richard finally lowered his glass, his voice calm yet edged. Richard said, "We all deserve the truth before we pretend this night is perfect." Emily felt her chest collapse inward. Daniel looked away, eyes fixed on the floor. Margaret's hand trembled over her pearls. Tyler kept silent, waiting. Emily's breath shortened as she whispered, "Not tonight, not like this." Daniel's silence cut deeper than words. Margaret's lips parted, but no sound came. Guests craned to catch each syllable, their curiosity now heavier than respect. Richard's expression hardened like stone. The DJ's voice cracked again as Tyler said, "The one who holds the purse strings demands the floor." Emily's world tilted, Daniel's grip unyielding as if to anchor her. Richard's glass landed softly on the table, the thud echoing louder than applause. The crowd braced for what was coming. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears as silence spread like smoke. Emily whispered, "Why am I always the one being tested?" Daniel's grip remained, his eyes darting toward the floor, unwilling to meet hers. Margaret leaned forward, lips trembling as if words had escaped her. Richard set his glass down, expression tightening like a mask carved in stone. The crowd's whispers swirled, but Emily felt isolated, the weight pressing entirely on her shoulders. Her smile, painted for the night, wavered. Daniel muttered, "We can fix this later." His voice, low and strained, offered no comfort. Emily straightened, her back rigid, her eyes flashing with defiance that concealed her panic. She remembered being 14, forced to smile through storms, a shield forged early. That shield now cracked as she whispered, "Not tonight, not this way." Emily thought of the years she saved every dollar to build this day. Emily whispered, "This was meant to be ours." Daniel's silence screamed louder than any defense. Richard's tone broke through, sharp but calm. Richard said, "Appearances matter, Emily." His words cut like glass hidden in velvet. Margaret touched her pearls, whispering, "Please, let it go." Emily's eyes burned as the facade threatened to collapse. Emily's breath shortened, chest heavy with unspoken truths. Emily whispered, "I won't be controlled." Daniel finally looked up, his jaw trembling as though words threatened to escape. Margaret shook her head, whispering, "This will ruin everything." Richard leaned back, eyes sharp like steel, calculating. The room leaned toward the drama unfolding, every guest silently choosing sides. Emily's mask cracked further, revealing fire beneath her practiced grace. Emily steadied her breath and forced her voice to hold. Emily said, "I have earned this day." The crowd stilled, sensing the eruption building beneath her composure. Daniel's eyes darted between his bride and Richard, trapped in impossible silence. Margaret whispered frantically, "Think of the family." Richard's smile returned, sharp as a blade, as he replied, "And think of the cost." Emily's heart cracked, yet her spine straightened. Emily's mind spun with memories of sleepless nights, planning, saving, surviving. She whispered, "I won't let you rewrite me." Daniel's silence pressed heavier, his hand trembling in hers. Margaret's face softened, regret shadowing her eyes. Richard leaned forward, voice calm but cruel. "Richard said every contract has a price, Emily." Gasps rippled across the hall. Emily's lips tightened as she whispered, "And every mask eventually breaks." Emily felt the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing into her skin. She whispered, "Everything is unraveling." Daniel's silence split her heart. Richard stood, his voice steady, as he declared, "This wedding is built on lies." Guests gasped, the sound sharp as breaking glass. Margaret reached for Emily's arm, whispering, "Please, sit down." Emily shook her head, whispering, "I will not be silenced." The DJ lowered his head, unwilling to meet her gaze. Old grudges suddenly stirred as a cousin muttered, "We knew this would happen." Emily's shield cracked further, the whispers cutting deeper than knives. Richard raised his glass once more, his tone coated in venom. Richard said, "Appearances matter more than vows." Emily froze, heat flooding her chest. Daniel whispered, "This is going too far." Margaret shook her head, whispering, "Please, let it end." But the crowd grew restless, murmurs rising as receipts of old debts were whispered from table to table. Emily whispered, "They're turning my wedding into their theater." A sudden voice cut through the whispers. A guest muttered, "Contracts decide everything." Emily turned sharply, eyes burning. She whispered, "This is not about money." Richard smirked, whispering, "Everything has a price." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. Margaret whispered, "Emily, you'll destroy us." The crowd leaned into the tension, like spectators at a cruel play. Emily's heart pounded as her hands trembled against her gown. Emily's voice broke through, sharp but trembling. Emily said, "I will not be bought." Gasps surged, spreading faster than fire. Richard's expression darkened, his smirk collapsing into a scowl. Daniel muttered, "Emily, please." Margaret pressed both hands to her pearls, whispering, "Think of the family." The crowd erupted in hushed accusations, financial deals spoken as though they were sacred vows. Emily's body stiffened, the storm closing around her. The whispers turned to revelations as a man near the back rose. He shouted, "The prenup in his pocket is dated yesterday." Silence slammed the room. Emily turned toward Daniel, her face pale as snow. Daniel's body stiffened, unable to speak. Richard smirked, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Margaret gasped, her pearls slipping from her grip. Emily whispered, "You hid this from me?" The truth shattered the night like glass on marble. Emily's knees weakened as the revelation spread through the room. She whispered, "A prenup dated yesterday?" Daniel opened his mouth, but no words emerged. Richard smirked, satisfied, as murmurs surged like wildfire. Margaret pressed her trembling hand to her pearls. Then, from the far side of the hall, Claire, Emily's cousin, stood with a folder in hand. Claire shouted, "Not everything is what it seems." Guests gasped again, their focus shifting. Emily turned, her eyes narrowing with desperate hope. Claire stepped forward, her voice firm. Claire said, "I have documents that prove more than anyone wants revealed tonight." Silence fell, thicker than before, as Emily whispered, "Show me." Claire strode forward, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Claire said, "This prenup was forced, but that's not the only secret." Emily's heart pounded as hope flickered. Daniel whispered, "Claire, don't you." Richard's smile vanished, his jaw tightening. Margaret whispered, "Please, don't do this." Guests leaned in, straining to catch every word. Claire held the folder high, voice unwavering. Claire said. This family has used contracts to control love for years, but tonight it ends. Emily's lips parted as she whispered, "She's telling the truth." The hall quivered under the weight of secrets about to explode. Claire opened the folder, papers trembling slightly in her hand. Claire said, "These are receipts, proof of debts paid to keep this day afloat." Emily gasped, her hand tightening around Daniel's. Richard barked, "Stop this spectacle." Margaret whispered frantically, "This will ruin us." Daniel's face turned pale, his silence damning. Guests erupted in murmurs, words like debt and control slicing the air. Emily whispered, "So that's what this wedding cost." Claire locked eyes with her cousin, nodding with grim affirmation. Richard stepped forward, voice booming. Richard said, "She doesn't know what she's talking about." Claire countered, "I have bank transfers signed by you." Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Emily felt her chest tighten as the truth unraveled. Daniel whispered, "Emily, I tried to protect you." Emily snapped, "By lying?" Margaret buried her face in her hands, whispering, "This family is tearing itself apart." The guests murmured louder, sides forming in silence. Emily's fury grew sharp, her mask dissolving. Emily's body stiffened, her voice cutting like a blade. Emily said, "You used my wedding to cover your debts." Richard's face froze, rage twisting into panic. Daniel's eyes darted, guilt choking his throat. Margaret whispered, "Emily, please don't." Claire stood taller, her voice steady. Claire said, "They've been writing your story with lies, but now you hold the pen." The room fell silent, the chandeliers flickering like judgment. Emily whispered, "Then tonight, I rewrite everything." The cost of every choice surged higher, and no one would leave unchanged. The silence weighed heavier than gold as Emily stepped away from Daniel, her gown trailing like a banner of defiance across the marble floor. Her pulse thundered in her ears, every step pulling her further from fear. Emily whispered, "This ends at the altar, not in their contracts." Her words carried sharp enough to slice through the whispering crowd. "And?" Daniel's face paled, his lips trembling before he muttered, "Emily, please, not here, not now." Richard rose slightly in his seat, his polished mask slipping into fury. Richard said, "You will humiliate us all." Margaret leaned forward, clutching her pearls until her knuckles whitened. Margaret whispered, "Keep the peace, Emily, for all our sakes." But Emily's chin lifted higher, her eyes burning with resolve. She whispered, "I will not make vows on lies." The DJ stayed silent, frozen, while Claire nodded softly from the side, her gaze firm. The chandeliers swayed faintly above, their light reflecting like fractured glass across Emily's face. The crowd held its collective breath. Emily turned toward the officiant, the only one who could seal or sever the ritual. Her breath caught as she asked, "Will you marry us on truth alone, without coercion, without lies?" The officiant froze, his hand hovering over the book. His eyes flicked to Daniel, then Richard, then back to Emily's blazing stare. Daniel whispered harshly, "This is going too far." Richard barked, "Absurd. No one defies the family name like this." Margaret's pearls rattled as her hand shook violently. Margaret whispered, "Please don't shame us." Emily's lips trembled, but her voice steadied. She said, "Say yes or no, Daniel. Stand with me or stand aside." Daniel's jaw quivered, but silence held him hostage, his mouth dry with guilt. Claire leaned forward, her voice sharp as glass. "He won't answer, Emily, so answer for yourself." Emily lifted her chin higher, voice trembling but strong. She said, "I will not sign my dignity away." Gasps rippled across the hall like a tide-breaking stone. The officiant's voice trembled, caught between duty and conscience, but steadied like steel. Officiant said, "I cannot proceed if consent is compromised." The hall erupted with murmurs. Emily's chest rose with fierce breath, strength swelling within her. Daniel's whisper fell like ash. Daniel said, "You'll destroy everything we built." Emily's eyes burned as she answered, "No, Daniel. I will save myself from being destroyed." Richard slammed his palm on the table, glassware clinking and shaking. Richard growled, "This is madness, girl." Margaret's pearls swung violently as she whispered, "The family cannot survive this shame." Claire's voice struck sharp and clear. "She is not destroying a family. She is reclaiming herself." Emily lifted her chin, voice steady as a vow. Emily said, "No contracts, no lies, only truth or nothing at all." Gasps burst like thunder, the air shaking under the force of her refusal. Guests whispered frantically, their faces etched with disbelief and reluctant awe. Emily reached slowly for her hand, sliding the ring from her finger. The crowd leaned closer, silence stretching thin as glass. She raised it, the diamond catching the chandelier's fractured glow. Emily whispered, "I return this ring, but I will not return myself. My name remains mine." Daniel's eyes widened, his throat tightening as regret pooled in his gaze. He whispered hoarsely, "Emily, please don't." Richard's fury collapsed into a stunned stillness, his powers stripped. Margaret whispered, her pearls slipping through her hand, "She truly means it." Claire stepped closer, her voice calm and steady. "This is freedom, Emily. This is yours." Emily lowered the ring, placing it gently onto the table. The metallic clink echoed across the hall like thunder in a cathedral. Emily whispered, "This is my vow, my truth, my choice." Gasps and muffled cries rippled through the ballroom as every guest felt history fracture before their eyes. Emily turned from the altar, her gown whispering across the marble like the final page of a book. She faced the guests, her voice rising steady and sharp. Emily said, "This wedding is broken, but my life begins tonight." Daniel's body slumped as if her words hollowed him. He whispered, "I never meant for this." Richard's face contorted, his jaw trembling with shattered pride. Margaret lowered her gaze, her pearls slipping unnoticed from her lap. Margaret whispered, "She is stronger than us all." Claire walked toward Emily, her shoulder aligned with hers. Claire whispered, "You chose truth when they demanded performance." Emily's lips curved faintly, her whisper almost prayer-like, "I chose dignity." Guests gasped, whispers crackling like wildfire, but no one dared to challenge her. Emily lifted her chin, walking toward the exit, and in that silence every soul knew they had witnessed not ruin, but rebirth. The music was gone, but Emily's heartbeat drummed louder than any orchestra. The silence inside the ballroom carried more power than applause. She whispered, "I feel lighter than I've ever felt." Daniel, unable to lift his gaze, muttered, "I never wanted it to reach this point." His shoulders sagged as though the confession emptied him of strength. Richard sat motionless, no smirk, no weapon of words left, only the quiet of defeat spread across his lined face. Margaret leaned forward, her hands trembling over pearls that no longer seemed like armor but a chain. She whispered, "We broke her for years, and still she stood taller than us." Claire, steady and unshaken, placed her hand on Emily's shoulder and whispered, "You turned their contracts into ashes, and now you stand unbound." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, tears gathering but never falling. She whispered, "I chose myself tonight, and that is the vow no one can erase." Emily moved forward, her steps echoing softly across the marble floor. She faced the officiant with eyes sharpened by resolve. Emily said, "Do not sign, do not bind, not for them, not for me." The officiant, torn between duty and conscience, pressed his lips together, then slowly closed the book. Richard's voice cracked as he hissed, "You've destroyed everything I built." His hand clenched the chair so tightly, his knuckles blanched. Emily turned, meeting his glare with calm defiance. Emily said, "No, I freed myself from the empire you tried to own." Margaret's pearls slipped from her grasp, scattering across her lap, her voice trembling. "But what of the family?" Emily's gaze did not waver. Emily said, "I am not your contract, not your ledger, not your pawn." Claire's voice joined softly. "That is the first vow in years that truly means something." The room exhaled, the choice undeniable. Emily turned back toward the tables, her voice sharp but steady. Emily said, "This is not spectacle, this is survival, this is truth." Daniel finally looked at her, guilt hollowing his face, his whisper nearly breaking. Daniel said, "I thought silence would protect you." Emily's eyes burned as she answered, "Your silence only protected the lie, and it nearly buried me beneath it." Richard sank deeper into his chair, shoulders slumped, his legacy collapsing around him like brittle glass. Margaret's lips quivered as she whispered, "We are exposed. Every secret stripped away in front of them." Claire stepped forward, calm yet fierce, saying, "Exposure is not the end. It is justice, and justice is survival too." Emily's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, one born not of triumph but of clarity. She said, "I will not apologize for reclaiming myself, for this is my only true vow." The guests sat frozen, nodding in uneasy respect. The chandeliers flickered, a shiver of light rolling across the room. Emily whispered, "Dignity is my vow, not the silence you demanded." Daniel's eyes watered though he held them downcast, his quiet the loudest confession of all. Richard, stripped of his sharp tongue, bowed his head into his hands, face weary and pale as dust. Margaret clutched the pearls with shaking fingers, whispering, "She was always braver than we let her be." Claire stepped closer, her voice gentle yet unwavering, saying, "Emily, you've already won what they cannot steal, yourself." Emily let her shoulders relax, exhaling years of buried pain. A faint smile touched her lips, not victory's smile but peace's. She whispered, "This is enough. I am enough." The guests shifted uneasily in their seats, no longer spectators of a spectacle but witnesses of a truth too raw to ignore. History crystallized in that silence. Emily drew one final breath, her voice ringing like a bell through the suffocating quiet. Emily said, "The checks may clear, but the apologies never will." Every guest jolted, struck by the truth that lingered like smoke. Daniel lowered his head further, unable to meet her eyes, his tuxedo suddenly feeling like a cage. Richard collapsed into his seat, powerless, his pride shattered into dust. Margaret's tears fell freely now, slipping silently down her cheeks, soaking into her gown. Claire leaned closer, whispering, "You ended the story on your terms, not theirs." Emily lifted her chin, her voice calm and steady. "I broke no vow, because my vow belongs only to me." The guests whispered among themselves, not out of curiosity but reverence. The scene burned into their memories forever. Emily turned away from the altar, her life whole even as the wedding lay in ruins. "Oh." Emily stood rooted beneath the chandeliers, silence folding around her like armor. She whispered, "They wanted a perfect wedding, but I wanted a real marriage." Daniel's breath caught, his body crumbling under the weight of her words, shoulders sinking as if shackles tightened. Richard, once master of the room, sagged into his chair, the gleam of control dimmed from his eyes. Margaret pressed her trembling hands to her lap, pearls hanging like forgotten relics. She whispered, "She has spoken what none of us dared." Claire's steady voice rose, clear and proud. Claire said, "You made freedom out of their spectacle." Guests shifted uneasily, whispers caught in their throats. Emily raised her chin, eyes burning with strength. She whispered, "Let this hall echo with dignity, not lies, for long after I walk away." The crowd, once judgmental, sat silent, bound by her final truth. Emily's voice grew stronger, filling the cavernous hall. Emily said, "Their script ends with me." Daniel muttered, "Emily, I failed you." She turned to him with steel in her tone, "No, Daniel, you failed yourself." Richard's fists tightened against the arms of his chair, but his silence betrayed surrender. Margaret's lips trembled as she whispered, "We lost her long before tonight." Claire's firm voice countered, "No, she reclaimed herself tonight." The guests stirred, glancing at one another, whispers blooming but fading quickly under the weight of Emily's gaze. She whispered, "Let them speak, let them twist, but I walk free." Her words rolled across the marble floor like thunder. The power shifted entirely, no longer resting with money or manipulation, but with the woman who stood tall in her broken gown, unbroken in her will. Emily's eyes swept the guests like a storm. Emily said, "You called me demanding, but this smile you mocked was a shield forged at 14. Gasps rippled through the crowd, sharp and unrestrained. Daniel dropped his head, guilt drowning him, his body hunched like defeat embodied. Richard's mouth opened but his voice faltered, unable to command even his pride. Margaret's tears slipped free, whispering, "She carried storms alone for years." Claire's words followed, unwavering, "And now she lays them down before all of you." Emily's lips curled, not cruelly but firmly, as she said, "I smile now only for myself, not to shield the comfort of liars." Her words struck deep, a truth etched into the marble as though carved in stone. The hall seemed smaller, the guests unable to look away. The chandeliers swayed as though nodding to the weight of her truth. Emily whispered, "When the music fades, what remains is dignity, and that is my vow." Daniel muttered, "I thought peace meant silence." Emily replied, "Peace built on silence is a prison." Richard rubbed his temple, face gray with the exhaustion of losing control. Margaret's voice cracked as she whispered, "She is stronger than all of us ever dared to be." Claire's voice steadied, low but sure, "Her vow is not broken, it is reborn here." Emily let her shoulders loosen, her face softening into peace for the first time all evening. She whispered, "This is enough, I am enough." The guests looked on, transfixed, the performance gone, replaced by a reckoning. Truth now lived where spectacle died. Emily stepped forward, her final words like fire and balm together. Emily said, "They wanted a perfect wedding, I wanted a real marriage." Silence thundered, sealing her fate and freeing her spirit. Daniel's eyes shimmered with tears, his body folding inward as shame consumed him. Richard leaned back, powerless, pride hollow. Margaret whispered through sobs, she walked away whole. Claire stood shoulder to shoulder with Emily, whispering, "That line will echo beyond tonight, beyond this hall." Emily's eyes lifted toward the chandeliers as if they too bore witness. She whispered, "This is the life I choose, and no contract, no silence, will rewrite it." The light glowed brighter, casting her in radiance. The guests remained frozen, reverence carved into their silence, knowing they had witnessed not a ruined wedding, but a woman rewriting history.